So at 7:05, we'll call the meeting to order. There are 5 planning commissioners in attendance. Ralph Bierschwal has informed us he won't be attending tonight. He's traveling, and we are still waiting for Aaron Graves. But I think we can get started. So we have Tim Staub from MCPC here tonight, and it appears we have 5 members of the audience. Gigi. Oh, hello, how are you?
Not going to be happy.
We have 5 members of the public here, and how many do we have online?
One.
Okay,
Online.
one
No,
person.
nobody's online.
So 6 members of the public. So our agenda tonight is pretty simple. We have chair's report, approval of the minutes, and 1 item for information. We have no action items tonight. There is a subdivision proposal for 13-99 Elmwood Avenue that the borough has
Can you
received.
speak up? Could you please speak up? This is wicked, and it sounds like there's a windstorm happening right here.
Okay.
This is the best the borough could do after 25 years of working on the air conditioning
We
in
don't
this
want you
room.
to turn it down, just speak out loud.
I'll try to speak up, but if it drifts into silence, just let me know. The borough has received a subdivision application for 13/99 Elmwood Avenue, which is really an adjustment of the lot lines in preparation for potentially building a house on one of the properties. But the applicant contacted me in the borough office today and requested that it be tabled until next month because they are still working out some issues with the zoning officer. So let's let that work out, and we will put that on our agenda in July. With that, we will go to chair's report, and I don't think there is anything I have to report, so that's a quick item. But Tim, is there anything to report from Montgomery County Planning Commission?
Montgomery County Planning Commission, we're still working on the active transportation plan with Narberth and Lower Merion. The up-to-date is that we are currently working on the network and the potential toolkit for items to implement for both the borough and the township. These will hopefully be presented to an upcoming steering committee meeting in July to kind of engage with the steering committee on how they feel the network and the different tools to use to implement the plan can proceed. And then once we have their feedback, we go back, work on it again, and then prepare for public outreach of the initial draft plan. And then once public input is provided to that, then we start moving towards final plan. So.
And there are some members of the public here and online. How can people learn more about the active transportation plan if they are interested?
There are 2 different places to find it. One is on the Narberth website. Let me get you the exact URL. So it can be found under. Where did it go? Sorry, I found it. I'm just trying to make sure.
Ever-expanding website. More and more.
We have the website. We have the product information. I'm just trying to get you a good spot to put it. So it would be under the Narberth website, under information, under projects, and then once you go to that, the active transportation plan will be the 3rd one from the bottom of the menu.
Any questions from the planning commissioners about this plan? Any updates from anyone else about any other? Would you like to make Councilmember Galdini, would you like to make a comment about the Parks Master Plan?
Oh, and Gene, yeah,
Sorry.
So yes, the Parks Master Plan planning process is continuing. When we get later in the process, much later in the process, there will be a presentation to Planning Commission specifically, so you'll have that to look forward to. Right now, we are in community engagement mode. There is a survey that is open that I hope all of you have taken, and if you haven't, please take it before September 9th. It's going to be open for quite a while. encourage your friends, families, and neighbors to also take that. We had our first community engagement meeting last week, but that went well. And we're, obviously, the study committee is continuing to meet, and we'll be progressing with various different smaller kind of stakeholder groups meetings that the consultant is going to lead with identified different organizations in the borough and kind of the key stakeholders. So that process is ongoing, and obviously, Planning Commission will additionally have a special role in that process as the overseer of the comprehensive plan.
Was that meeting recorded?
I believe that it
Yes,
was.
it's online
Yes.
now.
And it should be online. Yeah.
On the borough website or on where?
It's on the YouTube channel.
Great, thanks.
And if you all have any questions, happy to answer them to the best of my ability. You can also pigeonhole me at any point.
Mr. Caldini, you stated that there were key stakeholder groups. You opened the door, so we'd like to know what you mean by that.
Yes, so as a component of DCNR funding of plans, we were required to identify a certain number of quote-unquote key stakeholder groups as part of our criteria for the grant. It's a bit more generic. I mean, I think that they could have had us identify individuals. We took the tack of trying to cast as broad a net as possible. And so rather than identifying specific individuals, we try to identify groups. So for instance, the Civic Association, the Gardens, the one entity that didn't have kind of a specific group but we felt was important to include was the skate park users. So there wasn't a nonprofit skate park users, but they are there as an entity, and so we're working on figuring out how to corral them. And then additionally, in addition to kind of the stakeholder groups, DCNR has us identify, so those are kind of like, they call them key person. I'm calling them stakeholders so that we don't get the sense that they're individuals. There were other larger stakeholder groups that's different from the key person ones, and those are the institutional park users, so the folks that normally will show up at the annual park user entity, and anyone that is that is a larger entity that is an institutional user of the park, the athletic association, for instance, they have one dedicated stakeholder event. The other the school groups. So we really wanted to be attentive to making sure that we had outreach to that community, because oftentimes I think they can be underrepresented just because parents with children have a lot going on in their lives, and we wanted to make sure that there was specific attention paid to those groups. And then given the specificities and complexities of Station Circle Town Square as distinct from, say, Narberth Park and Elm Grove Park, we wanted to make sure that specific component of the plan had its own dedicated meeting for it. If you go back to if you look at the presentation of the last community meeting, they had the list of the various different identified groups, and we also tried to kind of piggyback and extend the number of groups that were able to be involved in that by not having just every group have one key stakeholder group, but were ones where they might be crossover. We tried to incorporate as many as possible in order to have the broadest possible net.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much for updating us. All right, so we will then move to approval of the minutes from our May meeting, which I was able to distribute this morning or late last night. Has anyone had a chance to look at the minutes and like to offer a motion for the minutes? You always do this, Jim.
I move we approve them as written.
Okay, is there a second for that?
Second.
Heidi seconds, and all in favor of approving the minutes as presented to us? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, they're approved and will be submitted to the Borough office for posting on the Borough webpage. Okay, so that brings us to the only agenda item of the evening. I'd like to make sure that members of the public understand this is an informational topic. This is not an action topic. It's not related to any current planning activity that the Planning Commission is undertaking, but it is related to a concern that's come up in a lot of conversations related to development proposals in the past, which have related to questions raised by planning commissioners and the public about the level, the price level, and the market level of housing costs in Narberth. And so, through the efforts of Planning Commissioner Anna Cohn, we've been able to have a guest come tonight to talk to us a bit about what experience has been with housing development and housing prices, and a new concept to me, attainable rental housing elsewhere in our region. So again, this is just an informational presentation, not related to any current actions or projects in the borough, but something we thought that we'd like to learn more about. And so we have a guest tonight from Penrose Development, and I'll let you, Ryan, introduce yourself.
I apologize, is there a printed agenda? I mean, I have the presentation, I'm sorry, I just was looking for the agenda, I apologize.
I don't have a printed agenda. Normally the borough puts them up there, but I do not see one, so I apologize. Usually they're put by the borough office up in that
Okay,
folder, but I don't have it.
thank you.
So with that, I'll turn it over to you, welcome you. Thank you for coming here and for giving us your time, and we're eager to hear what you can tell us.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Cornwell.
I'll try to speak up for the fan, because I know it's warmer out now. So, as you mentioned, my name is Ryan Bailey. I've worked for Penrose for almost 19 years. It'll be 19 years in November. I'm on the development side of things. So I'm a senior developer, and I run a number of teams that are running a number of affordable, attainable, market rate, workforce developments from Delaware to Philadelphia to Delaware County to Chester County. I happen to live in Ardmore, so this is a easy commute. So thanks for kicking the other group off early so I could start right at around 7 o'clock. That's great. Yeah, and I'm not pitching any specific deal. I've just been asked by Jennifer to come in and try to give an overview of what is attainable or affordable housing, and I'll try to do that to the best of my ability. So if you want to flip through, we'll go on the outline. So I'm just going to give you a Penrose overview, not that I need to sell you on Penrose, but you just need to know like who you're listening to and like kind of what our local experience is. We'll talk a little bit about the housing need, which is really like a regional thing. I'll go into we'll start diving into some definitions of what is affordable, what is attainable, that kind of thing. That's usually in all the committees that I'm on. I'm on committees in Delaware County and in Chester County who have kind of gotten together and tried to figure out what to do about the problems in their areas and how can they affect zoning and how can they, try to get developments done. And the first question they always ask me, like, stop, like, what does this mean? What are we talking about? So we'll do some definitions. I'll show you a schedule of an overall development, talk about the financing quick, and then we'll really dive into some of the solutions, like what are other groups doing? And then you guys can pick and choose as to what you think works for you. And then some next steps.
Before you go on, I'd just like to double check, is this presentation viewable to folks who are watching on Zoom?
I'm having a little trouble opening the PowerPoint. I don't suppose you have it as a PDF.
We could print it as a PDF there.
Because the
Yeah. So if you
sorry to interrupt, but I want to make, there's a number of people online, I'd like to make sure they can see.
Sure.
this.
There's like one person online, but it's Frankovich, but I can't,
Sign in to get started with
I have to sign into PowerPoint. Apparently it's not set up on this laptop.
I'm gonna send it to you.
Yeah, I sent
Yeah.
her a PDF earlier. Okay, I'll wait. So I guess I can go through the Penrose.
Sure.
Because they're basic. Um,
As PDF.
so Penrose is based out of Philadelphia. We're a privately held
Put
company.
it on the flash drive.
We started redeveloping
Yeah,
schools and old historic buildings into affordable housing, even before the low-income housing tax credit came in 1986. So we've been around for almost 50 years at this point. We have a development side and a management side. Because the development side checks all the boxes about affordability, about how long it's going to be affordable. In this case, these are 40 years. So you need to have a really good management company to then make sure that you're doing all the things that you said you were going to do at the beginning during the financing. And almost all of our clients have on-site managers and on-site maintenance people. So we're walking the site every day, making sure that it's good. So two-pronged developer and manager. We have a mission, a vision. Our core values are collaboration, results-oriented, accountability, and integrity. Trust me, it's not just on a piece of paper. We are regularly talked to about all these things, and we have awards every year for each one of these things. So we could, develop nearly anything, but our real niche is multifamily rental, affordable, attainable. We do probably 85% of our stuff is some sort of income restricted. The other 15% is market rate. But they're all probably larger scale developments. The smallest development we would do is probably 40, 45 units, something like that. And we'll show a number of examples just to show you how nice they can be. So the Penrose history started in the 70s. The low-income housing tax credit came in 1986, and that is really the driver. There's for all affordable and most attainable housing nowadays, and that funds probably 65% of the development. So that's when that came in. We started, kind of graduated from doing individual rehabs to really being brought in by cities and municipalities and maybe nonprofits that had older buildings that maybe needed to be rehabbed or maybe they needed to be knocked down. Then we got into larger scale redevelopments where we were taking old project housing on a very large scale and kind of demolishing it over different phases and rebuilding. So that was primarily all public housing, and now the goal with those big redevelopments is to include 25-30% of market rate or non-income restricted units, have some home ownership in there, have some community centers. These are very large scale redevelopments, hundreds of units, but we're also continue to do the one-off transactions as well. Penrose is now rapidly expanded, so we're based out of Philadelphia. One of the owners lives in Hampshire, right around the corner from us. But now we have kind of acquired other development groups, and we're in 20 different states. But it's nice to have, it's nice to only be working here, but then be able to call somebody who just did a deal in Phoenix and get some input on something that they did, or call somebody from Chicago and get some input. So, over 350 developments, 27,000 units. There's almost 500 employees. It's a pretty big development company at this point. All right, so enough of the good stuff. I'm on the Mary Taylor House, which was designed by Wallace Robertson Todd. If you were there.
Yeah, Penrose, yeah.
There at the time. So I'm just going to fly through a couple of slides here, just to give you a real feel for what these buildings look like, how they're maintained, how the architectural characteristics of them fit with the neighborhood. And most people are like, well, that's not an affordable building. That's not an attainable building. Well, it is. It's 100% senior affordable in Westchester. Absolutely gorgeous building, has a green roof. This is a LEED Gold building. It won all types of national awards when it opened. It's really important that our buildings are very sustainable. These are really strongly built buildings because I am not building a building and selling it after it gets leased out. I'm going to own this building for 30 or 40 years. So you need to make sure it's built really, really strong. You also don't have a whole lot of income coming in because these are income-restricted developments. So you really, at the front end, you really need to make sure that you have a lot of sustainability features. You have renewable resources, if you can. I saw the Sustainable City certificate downstairs, something that Norbert takes into consideration. You guys are a tree city. We plant trees all over these things. So the takeaway here is that this is in a more affluent area of Westchester, not unlike Norbert, and it fits right into the community. And that is a low-income housing tax credit deal. Next is Doylestown Senior, a project I'm working on right now. This is immediately adjacent to the borough. This one is kind of interesting because the townhouses there are going to be for sale market rate townhouses. So this is a partnership with another developer. They put the ground under agreement. They heard from the municipality that they really wanted affordable housing there. So he reached out to us and said, hey, I have this great piece of ground. You won't believe it's walking distance to downtown Doylestown. They want affordable housing. So we are going to build the senior building there in the back. 4 stories, it's 60 units, and we're going to focus, this will be 62 and above, age 62 and above, and we're going to be marketing it to veterans. And this is a whole supportive services component. This has a very heavy amount of supportive services that would be involved in the building to make sure all those veterans take advantage of their benefits. Next one, Sharswood Crossing. This was just built. This is in northern Philadelphia. This is a family development, 60 units. Girard College is there in the back, if you can see it, the lower right-hand part of the corner. So this is a partnership with the Philadelphia Housing Authority, and just an example of what you can do with family. This is a mixture of incomes, so this will be, there'll probably be 20% market rate in this building, and then the rest of it is income restricted. What you're going to hear me say a couple of times today is that really to do attainable housing correctly, which is something above the low income level, you really need to do a mixture of low income and attainable and maybe even full market rate in the development. That's really how the numbers work for these things.
So you're saying the other types help pay for the lower income units?
They actually help pay for the attainable.
Attainable, yeah.
The market rate has real market rents that you'd be able to achieve and put hard debt on the development. The affordable component, under 80% area median income, would have tax credits and county funds and other kind of subsidies. That middle band that is just as good as every other unit in the building just has low rent coming in. So you can't just build, your developments you were doing before, you can't just build the same product and charge less rent and it's going to work. So you actually have to subsidize it with the market rate and the affordable components. All right, West Turner Residences is another one. This is up in Allentown. Again, very green, kind of applicable to Norbert because it has first floor commercial on it. So this is a big medical clinic in it. So people can literally take the elevator down and go right into the medical clinic. And this was a partnership with Sacred Heart Hospital, which really, it's great. Hospitals now are looking out into their area and trying to develop to make it nicer around them. So we've done a lot of partnerships with hospitals. They have land. They are mission driven. They are patient, and they want to also have brand new space that they can put their clinics into. So this was a real win. Next one, Meriden Commons, a really attractive building that we built up in Connecticut. This was part of a big master plan. There's a big park in front of this. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's waterfalls and stuff in it. The town did a really, really nice job. And so we came in, and this is a mixed income family development. You see 4 or 5 stories in here. It has first floor mixed use in it. This was built in 2018, and this is part of a larger master plan. There's a couple of these buildings, but this is, on the scale that could be, somewhere in this area. This or maybe even a little smaller. Next. John C. Anderson, right downtown. This was also designed by WRT. And this was a really cool building because it is seniors and it is also LGBTQ friendly. And this is a real hot button all around the country, that band generally does not have the same income level. And we built this building, what was this, 10 years ago? Yeah, 10 years ago. And now have partnered on ones in Cincinnati, in Phoenix, in Boston. I mean, this is a real need here. And this is just an absolutely fantastic looking building. It's absolutely stunning. Okay, enough of the pretty pictures. So what is the problem? And just to quantify this a little bit, so I just did a quick Google search will tell you that the median sales price in Narberth in April, just this last April, is $910,000, which is amazing. Good for you all who bought a long time ago. But rents are, there's only 7% that are below $1,500 a month. 81% are $1,500 to $2,000, and then 13% are above $2,000. Really, what you talk about in rental is what percentage of the person's income is going into their living expenses. So I count living expenses as rent and utilities. And that's how the federal government does it for low-income housing. So their goal is to have both those numbers, rent and utilities, only be 30% of what the person makes. So if you're in a totally subsidized building, that's what you pay. Whatever is 30% of your income divided by 12. Most renters, almost like 48% of the renters in the region are above 40%. No, sorry, above 30%. Nearly half the renters are cost burden paying more than 30%. And I saw something the other day that it was like the almost 35% or something was over 40%, which is just like, I mean, you're just strapped. Like, how are you going to cover your expenses when you have that? And that's a paycheck to paycheck scenario. And if something should happen, like you get a car accident or something like that, you just don't have those reserves built up. And affordable or attainable developments in this area have probably a 10x waiting list. If you call around, they have just an unbelievable need, and those people are not getting housed. All right, so who are we talking about? And I'll actually say that early in my career, there was a much higher percentage of people that did not have jobs. And now when you go to the different housing authorities, because housing authorities per county are really involved in this, and we're doing a big redevelopment in Wilmington right now, 75% of their residents have jobs. Delaware County, 70% of their residents have jobs. So the gig economy is very, very big for this. So these are people who are working, and they just happen to make lower amounts of money. A Walmart clerk. We're talking about recent college graduates. We're talking about EMT with a working partner. Obviously, elementary school teachers. And then one that we're really spending a lot of time on are seniors who are on fixed income. They grew up in the area. They can now not afford to live where they grew up. They want to be near their family members. They want to downsize. So the renting is a real good opportunity for that. Household income. This is kind of a fun chart. I apologize for being lazy. This is Chester County. I tried to modify this. It was a fixed PDF. But here's the idea. So, if you're talking the lower income levels, you're talking about childcare workers, retail workers, firefighters, that's all within the affordable band. Then you get up into like the attainable or workforce band. You're talking about physical therapists, dental hygienists, registered nurses, and some of the elementary school teaching positions. You start adding this up, and you realize that over 50% are either in a lower income band or in that workforce attainable band, which is like the middle income. And, you know, these are, everybody in this room knows these people. You know, some of us are these people. And, you know, they have a job, they need a good place to live, and they want to be near all the amenities that a, you know, Westchester, Doylestown, or Harvard would have. All right, so in the definitions section, which is the next slide, so, you know, historically affordable to me means you can get a low-income housing tax credit for that. So that is typically, you have to, in order to get a low-income housing tax credit, you have to either have 40% of your units at 60% of area median income. Area median income is published by HUD. It comes out by county. It's updated annually. So it's just a number that everybody can base off of. Or 20% of the units have to be at 50% of AMI. And to be in low income, you can have a percentage go up to 80% AMI, but you need to make sure that your average is still below 60. So they did that to make sure that you can have a mixture of incomes. Because you'll see on the next chart that 80% AMI is actually pretty high. And so you want to be able to have a true mixture of incomes in all these developments. I mentioned before the low-income housing tax credit usually funds 50 to 70% of the development. And then the tenant is supposed to pay 30% of their income. I already mentioned those things. So attainable versus or workforce is rental units at 60 to 120% of area median income. 120% of area median income is very high. But they still are not getting enough rent, and they need to be subsidized by the other two sides. So again, it needs to be a mixture, and the buzzword that you'll hear is mixed income, that there's a mixture of incomes in the building. All right, I'm going to pause there, because that is a lot of information to take in. Does anyone have any questions at this point about that? Happy to go back and refresh any of that.
Any questions, any questions?
Okay, we'll keep moving.
Well,
Everyone has a,
so the low-income housing tax credits, so you say, how do those pay for affordable housing?
so you apply to the state to get low-income housing tax credits before you start the development. The amount of low-income housing tax credits you can get is based on development costs. And then each state probably has a cap of how much you can get. That tax credit is given to the development in the form of like IRS federal tax credits over a 10-year period of time. You sell that 10-year annuity to a bank. You get money during construction to build it. It's really kind of cool. So you get a 10-year stream of tax credits. Like the easy math, right, is like, let's say you get $1 million a year. So you're going to get $10 million, and then you sell it to most likely a bank, someone who has a lot of tax liability, and you sell it to them like 90 cents on the dollar, 92 cents on the dollar, something like that. So then you take your 9.2 million and you put that towards the project. Then the rest of the funds that come into the project are either from the county or some other, there's a whole mixture of acronyms that I can throw at you. But there's a number of federal sources that you can get, primarily through HUD.
That's grants or what sources? Like what kind of sources do you?
They actually, well, they come in as 0% loans into the project.
So they
There is a chart I have another slide about it. I can actually show you how one was financed. But everybody always kind of stops me in the presentations and they want to know, so the next slide is like the actual income breakdown. Now this is kind of mind-numbing to look at this thing. But, you know, like if you're in a 1-bedroom apartment and you're at 60% AMI, you're paying $12.56 to be in that 1 bedroom. And that is still considered a low-income housing, you know, affordable level. You know, 2-bedroom, at 60%, you're at $15.07. I bet the new developments that are going in Arbor right now are, far exceeding those numbers, maybe doubling those numbers. But those are pretty decent rents.
And that's the AMI for a one-person household, or does it matter?
Yeah, so the one person, right, if you're at 60% AMI, one person household, you're up to $46,000, almost $47,000. You start adding people, and so it's the income band is based on the number of people that are living in the unit. So if you double this, with two people at 120%, you're $106,000. And this is countywide again.
That was my question. What's the area median income for Arbor? Or is it countywide or?
It's county.
It's countywide. If you want, I can probably get somebody to figure that out.
Okay.
It's going to be higher. The area around here is going to be higher, but it's based on a county level. Okay. This would be the governing set of numbers. All right, Jennifer asked me to talk about some of the nitty-gritty and a typical development schedule, because these projects do take time, like every real estate development. But there is an added element of this in that developers are not usually just going out and buying pieces of land and stockpiling them. Like that really doesn't happen. The part of the challenge with these is that you get property under agreement with a seller, then you want to go through and make sure you can get all the financing, because some of these different financing mechanisms are very competitive. So it takes time to pull all that together. Then you want to go through, with the municipality and make sure you had all the approvals. And typically you're transacting on the property when you pull all that together. And so you're buying the property and starting construction the next day. But that is probably like a 2.5-year process. So I'll just walk you through this. So the first thing that happens is some sort of site control document. And then you go right in and there'll be an application to the county. The county has home funds that they receive from HUD, and that's really like the first step. You want to make sure that your county is in support of the project, and make sure that they're going to fund it. Then the county awards it. You go and apply for some other Federal Home Loan Bank is another acronym, another source of money. And then there's a low-income housing tax credit application every year with the state. So we all anticipate when that's going to happen, and we're pretty sure that this year that application is going to be due in early December. So just, you would first go to the county, then come around and apply for tax credits from the state. The state is going to take 6 months to make their decision. In order to make that application, you're going to want a very clear path to zoning. You're going to want
Very clear what?
path to zoning. Make sure that it's something the municipality wants. You want to make sure that there is a lot of support for it. You want to make sure that there's people in the community that are really going to stand up and say, this is something we want, this is something we need. Because if that doesn't happen, then it's just not going to happen. Like, there's not going to be enough push. So then you get the award, and then you really launch into all the design work and land development approvals. And that is something that has really pushed up the cost of these developments over the past several years. Everybody knows that construction costs have really accelerated through COVID. And so if you had a deal that penciled out and made sense and had the funding available, but then your land development approvals took maybe 9-10 more months, you literally could have seen 15% increase in construction costs during that period of time. And now your deal that worked fine, a year ago does not work anymore. And then you're finding yourself going back to all those funding sources, hat in hand, saying, it's still a really good idea, I need more money. Now, thankfully, construction costs have leveled off a little bit, but there are many municipalities that we work with that an affordable deal comes in, an attainable deal comes in, and they push it. And And they make sure you can get in and get through approvals because they know it's not a return metric to me. I'm not like a market rate developer who's going to like flip the thing and get a big return. That's not what it is. There's a state required or state capped developer fee that a developer is able to make. That number does not go up. That number only goes down. So that's the maximum you can make. And then if you have increased costs that go throughout the project, that just comes out of, you just have to cover that. That's how it works.
So these awards from the state, they come with the maximum developer fee, you're saying on top of it?
Yep. Yeah, the low-income housing tax credit has a state regulated developer fee. So then you get the tax credit award, you usually close a year later. So if like, I'm just using like, if we had applied just the county just a couple months ago, you know, you'd start construction May of 26. It would probably take a year, 15, 16 months to build the development. And then, you know, you're leased up December 27. If you build any attainable or affordable development within 8 miles of here, there would be a line out the door. It would lease up instantly. And there would be such a need, there would be a waiting list, just like I said, there would be a 10x waiting list, you know, probably within a 2-year period of time. All right, financing. The next slide. So there was another slide that I took off of here, but if you were going to do just a market rate development, you've got equity that comes in from the developer, and you've got debt that comes in from a bank. And those are usually the only two sources. Sometimes a municipality or an agency will have some sort of creative financing that goes in there, but usually that's it. So in this case, this was a larger development that actually took place in Cincinnati. There is hard debt on this, so this is a $65 million project. So this is pretty big. $5 million in that traditional hard debt, you know, must pay. Low-income housing tax credit equity was $20 million. So at this point, that's only a third of the development. Thankfully, in Ohio, there's a historic tax credit, and there's a federal and a state historic. So $10 million of it came from that. This had new market tax credit equity in it. So that is a mechanism that can be used when there's a large commercial component to an affordable housing development. It's very complicated to use. The soft debt is the interesting part here. So, you know, we got 18 million of soft debt. So that probably came from the county. That probably came from the Federal Home Loan Bank. That probably came from the state itself. When they give the tax credit award to you, they'll give you some of those soft financings as well. And when I say soft, that means that you are signing up to do affordable housing for 40 years. And if you continue to do that and check all the boxes that you've done for those 40 years, you don't have to pay it back until the end, or there's some sort of refinancing, or most likely in these developments, you go back and ask for more tax credits and push it another 40 years. That's usually what happens here.
So it's debt you're not paying back as long as you meet certain terms.
Exactly.
What was like the cost per unit for this development if you know, and if not?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to.
The average is
Um,
450.
Yeah, I'd say this is Ohio. It's a little less expensive, so I'd say you're in the 450,000 per unit range up there
For construction, you're saying, or?
for probably all in.
Sorry, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, total development cost.
And so you're saying that you still have an 8% gap.
Yep. And so that is what a developer has to go out and find, and you just keep having to bang on more and more doors to make that work. Every deal at the beginning has a gap, just absolutely every single one. And then it's just, you have to go find the money. More recently, a lot of the ARPA funds that came out, to offset the COVID impact, were eligible for low-income housing. And so we use a lot of ARPA funds to counteract those very high increase in construction costs. That was likely something they looked at here. Possible solutions. It is challenging, but it can get done. Trying to paint a not too rosy of a picture. All right, so this was actually pulled together by a group in Westchester that really kind of just came together. There were a bunch of land use attorneys. There are some professors at the Westchester University. There are some local elected officials. They asked me to jump in because I'm from Westchester and like I know the affordable housing side of it. And so they're meeting regularly with Westchester Borough and the townships around it to pitch them what they can be doing to create more affordable or attainable housing in the Westchester area. So, first things first, there needs to be an attainable or an affordable use ordinance in the zoning code. If it's not a use in any of the code, then you can't build it. The Doylestown project that we have going on, we just got zoning, we passed an ordinance in December of last year to actually add attainable housing as a use in the district that the development is in. So there had not been anywhere as a use. So obviously you have to look at your zoning code and make sure that it is actually an applicable use.
Do you mean that the code is referencing AMI or?
Yeah, it talks about it needs to be.
Categorize it by income and.
Yep, there's a certain percentage that need to be, affordable at a certain level of income. And so that is in the underlying zoning. There's one is the 40 years of affordability that I'm gonna have to agree to because of low amount of tax credit, but the underlying zoning will have to maintain affordability. And then what that did is we got parking allowances. So they said you can park this less because we gave them all types of data saying that our 161 bedroom units for senior veterans were only going to need like 0.5 spaces per unit. So I think we agreed to set something like in the 6.7 range, something like that per unit. They gave us setback variances, so we could use more of the lot.
Variance, or is it codified that it's a different standard for the attainable housing?
Sorry, it's not a variance, you're right. They wrote it into the ordinance saying that, now the setbacks will go from, I don't remember the numbers, but like the 25 feet to 15 feet. But there needed to be a buffer, all the way around the site. So we clearly agreed to that.
How would the municipality be able to know that the units are income restricted over a long period of time as opposed to, how does the regulatory function work after it's constructed?
Sure, so we will have to give annual reports to the state, and the county will ultimately fund that development as well, so we'll have to give them to the county, and we'll just send the same exact reports to the municipality. So they don't have to come looking for the information, they don't have to come in and ask. But that is the big question that people definitely talk about, particularly when you get up into like that workforce band, where there's no other group that's actually like requiring that level, that oversight, that compliance. So I think you just have to make a deal with whoever the developer is, that they have to put together a report and they have to, submit it just like they would for a low-income housing tax credit or a county award. Some groups are talking about density bonuses. I haven't actually been involved in one that gave a density bonus. That's like if you did a certain percentage of affordable or attainable, you can build like 10% more buildings or more units. Philadelphia has one of those. They were really one of the first ones around here to do that. So if you had a certain level of affordability, you could probably add another floor to your building. Obviously, you'd have to have the height variances as well for that, but that's something that a lot of groups are doing. But to me, getting it in the code, reducing the parking requirement for that, and I know every municipality deals with parking in its own way, and Norberth is a tight-knit borough. You have a train station, which is great. You probably have a lot of amenities that people can walk to. But when you start adding a whole lot of parking to one of these multifamily buildings, you just eat up all the space and you don't have any left. Eat up all the space and you don't have any left. And then what's the sense?
So you're saying adding more parking makes the project less affordable to construct and operate?
Yes. Yeah, you're eating up the land. Structured parking is extremely expensive. So we really don't have too many developments that have much structured parking. You have to have a pretty big commercial component to be able to afford something like that.
We lost our Zoom connection.
Okay.
Interesting.
Let's hope we can reestablish it. Good thing we're not hitting the Mars or anything. I have a question about the ordinance. So the fact that you have an affordable housing ordinance is not necessarily connected to the other bullet points, I would think. Is there a reason why you have to have an ordinance? Like, does the state require you to have a municipality to have an ordinance defining this before it will give money or before it will sign a low-income housing tax credit? Or is the reason to have an ordinance simply to enable all these other changes in the code that would benefit the planning of the building?
It's a good question. We would not have been able to build, we were in a light industrial zoning district that did not have, this kind of housing as a use. So one, we had to get that in there. Then, you're right, that we used the ordinance to add these other elements on there that would make the whole development as planned, actually function.
So that was just a circumstance of the meeting to be able to use, this is Doylestown, I assume you're referring to, right?
Yeah, technically it's Doylestown Township. We're right
Yeah.
next to the borough, but we're actually in Doylestown.
But the state doesn't require a municipality to adopt any kind of local ordinance in order.
The state is going to require, when you apply, that you have a pathway to zoning. Some way of making sure that the municipality is going to get there. And usually that is an attorney's written letter with
Recording in progress.
These are the meetings that you're going to have to attend, and this is the pathway. That will enable you to apply. You can also, if you have zoning in place, when that application goes in, you get more points for that. All these are very competitive funding sources, especially with the state tax credits. So you want to maximize all your points whenever you can. So that's 10 points today in the QAP, in the Qualified Allocation Plan. So not required, but it's definitely helpful. And also, as you guys are attracting developers or having this interest, they're going to want to know that there is a path, because there have been deals that went through all this and got awarded the tax credits, and then the municipality decided to change their idea and not give them the approvals. And then you're giving money back to the state after a pretty healthy investment. Putting in one of these low-income housing tax credit applications is probably $150,000. By the time you get the architects involved and pay all the fees and do all the market studies and all that stuff. Not to mention the year and a half of your life. One thing that a lot of municipalities are looking into, there are accessory dwelling units. So that is the apartment above your garage, having some sort of other small apartment, like sometimes they're called in-law suites, something like that. Westchester has adopted one. Kennett Square is looking to adopt one right now. It's a way of accommodating some units, but you're not really operating on any sort of scale. It doesn't move the needle. It doesn't help out the people who really need to be helped. If you could, I don't know actually if you have an accessory dwelling unit. You do, okay. And how many are there in the in the borough.
I
Have
can't
been
say.
permitted since the ordinance, none have been, last I checked with Kevin. There was someone that exploded, but nothing came of it.
Yeah. So helpful. I don't think it moves the needle.
It's almost just a gesture,
It's
which
almost a gesture.
which we have happily made.
Yeah.
But-
Kenneth is saying for every unit you have to have 2-car parking. So that just takes it all out. You know, that's impossible. You know,
Where is that?
in addition to the.
Excuse me, the audio isn't working on Zoom.
Muted?
Well, is it, did it come back? Because we were off of Zoom for a while
I
there.
just got a message saying that
I see
people are
this.
muted, they can't hear the video because it's muted.
On the left there.
Is it a bad connection?
Yeah,
It was,
there it is.
it was muted again.
Are we back?
Yes.
There we go.
We have a backup recording going too, so I'll
There's also an application at the Department of Economic Development of the state that would allow this borough to actually improve their hybrid meetings, which is required under the Pennsylvania current rules adopted by the state assembly in 2022. So you might want to look into it.
Audio's back on according to mine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so wrapping this up. So the next page is this. There you go. This is what municipalities can do. So this development is real now. This is in Phoenixville Borough, and they took an old public works facility and transferred it to a for-profit developer who built this beautiful senior affordable building that just opened a couple of weeks ago. So that was underutilized land that the municipality got together and decided to put forth for affordable. I believe this has a commercial component as well. There's a parking lot on the other side of the building here. One thing that we are always, when we go into a municipality, we always want to find out, you know, who is the local elected official who's really going to like drive this thing home. So really, if this is something that's important to Narberth, there just has to be a true champion around this. It also makes a whole lot of sense to find, you always have to find a group or a stakeholder, like you were saying before, that really wants this thing to happen. That will show up at the meetings and that will, go door to door and talk to people about it and will help spread the word. And usually that is a group that everybody has a very high level of respect for. And they are, looking at this as a certain group, whether it's low-income seniors that are veterans, LGBTQ, whether it is, kids coming out of the foster care system. Typically, there is a supportive services component to these buildings that a percentage of the development, probably up to 25%, really treats. So you really try to find that group that is really going to go to bat for the development and really help push for a really great development that's going to help out a group that is in need. All right, so basically in summary, address zoning restrictions is the first thing that can be done. Identify land/development sites with mission-driven and patient sellers. So it could be the municipality, it could be a church, some have housing authorities that own land. Finding groups that are patient and will allow the developer to go through the whole process in order to get a viable project. And then of course there's a lot of education about this. It's showing the pictures of what the development is actually going to look like. We have the opportunity, I'd welcome if people wanted to take tours of our developments. We could arrange a bus and take people on a tour. It really just, you don't really get it until you're there. All the time we take people on tours and they're like, well, this isn't affordable or attainable housing. And we're like, yes it is. This is very high quality stuff and this is exactly what it can be. And that's it.
Thank you.
This is a development that's in East Falls, right by the river there. And it has commercial on the lower levels, and it has affordable housing.
Well, thank you.
That wasn't too long.
Compared to most of our meetings, no. This is happily brisk. I would love just to entertain questions and conversations, just so folks in the meeting know. What we'll do first is take questions or comments from planning commission members, and then open up to the public here, who's here tonight, and also to the public who's online. So, I'll
Mind if I add a statistic
I think
to the
online.
conversation?
Go ahead.
So the National Association of Home Builders published a report last week that outlined that the median home price in the country was $495,000, and that 77% of U.S. households, based on the latest HUD income levels, cannot afford to buy a home at the average home across the country. And the statistic that you gave was the average home in Narberth was 900? 910. And the income for Montgomery County is 114 for this year, and so the median income cannot afford to buy a home in Narberth or in much of the surrounding area if the average home is $495. And so that population becomes renters. And so you then have to take into account the cost of new construction rentals, which range typically 2 times the rent. And so it's just an interesting component of the conversation. When you start to factor in, if you can't build, you have to rent. And if you can't afford to rent, what do you do?
So I have a question. Narberth is a very small borough.
Excuse me, Heidi.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because of the sound, could you speak up a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit?
Narberth is a very small borough, and it's pretty built out. So what's the magnitude of scale of a potential affordable housing development? I mean, these are obviously much larger projects than we could ever probably build here. So how do you see something fitting into our borough?
Creatively. I think the smallest development that is viable to have a manager there and a maintenance person there and to cover the sunk cost of that is probably 45 units. So yeah, right off the bat, there's going to be very few parcels that can do that in the borough, no doubt.
To put that in perspective, that's the Elm.
Is that 45 units?
It's about 47 units, I think.
Yeah.
It's the biggest thing ever built in Narberth.
And there might be, does the Elm have like 3 and 4 bedroom units in it?
There might be somewhat larger
we have
units
some
than
free.
typical.
Some 3s? Okay.
I think the average square footage is also significantly higher than what the requirement is by the Pennsylvania Housing Authority.
So it could have had more units.
But I'm wondering,
So you could be smaller than that, particularly if you were going to go senior, that's probably 95% 1 bedrooms. And so those buildings are going to be smaller than that.
what are the kind of drivers of that scale? You mentioned management, but like I know, for example, some property managers here manage several scattered site buildings with one manager. So is it just the management, or is there something about the construction, or that makes that the kind of threshold, or is there some lower scale of construction that could be fit in more of a scattered site way?
It can be done in scattered site. Typically then you're dealing with, maintaining little pockets of development all over the place. So difficult to put that all together, right? Instead of one site, you're now trying to buy 5 or 6 or whatever. Then making sure that you've got zoning in place in all those areas. So scattered site is tough. It can be done. We're doing a lot of scattered site in places in Philadelphia where there's a lot of land that's available, and where that's really like infill housing. Our group primarily is an infill developer. We're a redeveloper. We're not really going out and knocking down trees and, building, like knocking down cornfields and stuff. We like the urban setting, so we like to take something that's already been developed and redo it. I have tried to pitch to our management company that, I'll be able to have fewer operating expenses in this building over here because I'm gonna have a shared manager between these two. And it's very difficult to do that. I'm continually told that that bright idea is not very functional. So there's, sure, if you were going to do, a small number of units, let's say you cobbled together 40 units, yes, you could probably have one manager overseeing that. But once you start getting more than that, you're going to start adding significant, management and maintenance, because that's a lot more maintenance as well. As opposed to one roof, you might be dealing with 10 or 12.
You build them solid, don't you?
We try.
Other questions?
Ryan, I have a question. Thanks for coming in. It's very, very helpful. Just at a macro level, because I know the LIHTC award process is very competitive. And
Low income housing tax credit,
yes,
for those
LIHTC.
who are translating acronyms.
So let's say, fast forward, it gets in the ordinance, just hypothetically. But the chances of Narberth getting a LIHTC award versus Center of Philadelphia or other boroughs, I mean, what are the kind of likelihood of that happening if you had to handicap it?
I think that, well, one, you really have to pay attention to the scoring, right? So you can't just like toss something in. So you'd have to really make sure that you were trying to maximize all the scoring you could. I think that it would look extraordinarily good to the state to be able to do something in a more affluent area. Just like the Westchesters of the world, just like the Doylestowns of the world. Like that kind of jumps out at them a little bit. As someone who's developed a ton of property in Philadelphia, they will keep putting, developments in Philadelphia that will keep happening. And those are very high quality and they should be done. But they are also looking to do it in, areas of choice, I would say.
And then second part of the question, the attainable housing piece of it, is there a possibility of having that without the LIHTC award? Have you seen that done, or do you really have to have the LIHTC to kind of have the attainable piece?
I cannot make the numbers work.
Even with like market rate?
The problem is right now, I would say maybe 5-6 years ago, you might be able to do that before construction pricing went up and before interest rates went up. But now when you drop in higher construction costs, higher interest rates, it's really hard to make any market rate development work. I mean, the ones that are getting done now had to go forward because they were like sunk. Like they bought the land or that they had a lot of sunk costs, then COVID hit, and they decided to just push through. I mean, I'm sure you guys are seeing a real drop off of building permits now. There was a huge spike in 2021, and since then, it's just come straight down. So, yes, I have sat there and I've been getting an amazing number of phone calls from market rate developers that I've known for years that are like, hey, can I put some units in my building and make the municipality happy? And can you help me get the math to work? And it's just not really there. Without the other subsidies there's really nothing subsidizing that middle tier. Questions?
Do nonprofits developers have any advantage in this process as opposed to a for-profit developer?
There are some, particularly the Federal Home Loan Bank is one that their scoring criteria, you get more points for having a nonprofit involved. So there's a couple of different ways you can get points there. One, of course, nonprofit could own the whole development, or they could be a partner in a development, or they can just be involved and have, influence over the project. So it's not an all or nothing type of thing, but yes. So we partnered with 80 some nonprofits, over the years. Some are, have a piece of land, some have influence in their communities, some, the whole gambit. But yeah, the majority of our developments are partnerships, whether that's with the municipality, whether that's with a church or another nonprofit, housing authorities, that sort of thing. We are not typically just going out and trying to pick up a piece of land that just hit the market, because those sellers are trying to sell their piece of land. If you got a corner property and you put it on the market, your intention is to sell that piece of property quickly. And I'm going to come in and say, I'm going to need 2+ years to get the whole development together.
You mentioned patient sellers in your slideshow, but I guess that makes me wonder, is there any kind of imputing of land cost breakdowns into the numbers you were giving us?
Can you say that one more time?
Well, you mentioned patient sellers, but I'm wondering, like in that one project from Cincinnati, you showed us numbers and all the different ways you might finance something. Are you also imputing land cost breakdowns into the project costs?
Well, we're including the cost of the land.
Yeah.
That's maybe another way of answering the question. So, like in the Doylestown scenario, like there's a very real cost to that land,
right?
That we are including in there. Now, if I do a deal with a housing authority per se, or sometimes with a municipality, it's a long-term ground lease, and that long-term ground lease is really kind of at a lower level. So it makes it easier to get the job accomplished in that sort of way. But so we do a lot of deals with 65-year ground leases, which is the minimum that the local housing tax credit investor will accept.
Is that like that Phoenixville example on public property?
They transferred it. It's fee ownership to the
purchase
developer.
the parcel, or
Yeah, they purchased the parcel.
Do you bring in the architects and the builders?
Yes.
And so you have architects and builders that you work with, or how does that?
Yeah, we have a pretty steady roster. Things ebb and flow in that, but yeah, for Penrose has a 200-page design manual that says everything that we do, how we insulate, the kind of doors we use, the kind of windows we use, and those groups have helped write that over the past 30-some years.
So there's a level of construction that you're looking for?
Yes. Not to say that another architect can't pick that up,
Right.
Because we do work with various professionals. But as soon as you really get a group that's good, then you have figured something out, then you move along. The one that is probably more locally driven is a civil engineer.
So that would not be somebody you would pick, it's somebody the borough would pick if they were working?
No,
Or the developer.
we would still select it. I mean, if it was a partnership with a borough, then it's a partnership decision, that sort of thing. Yes.
On the leasing side, are the applicants coming through the housing authority, or are they coming through the Penrose?
It's a good question.
Management.
It depends on if there's operating subsidy involved in the development or not. So if there is operating subsidy that comes in, like a voucher program, that usually comes in from the housing authority. Okay. And the housing authority, you'd say, okay, I have an opening, and I'd like to have someone come in, and they'll give you a referral. They go through credit and criminal background check, and okay, you're in the building that way. If it's not a voucher unit, then yes, it's somebody that has applied directly to Penrose.
When you say voucher, that's Section 8, I think.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that as a bad connotation. I will tell you that many of the buildings that I showed you have a percentage of vouchers in them. And from our perspective, it is literally just an income that comes into the development that allows us to maintain the building the way it should be maintained. You still have the person that's gone through a credit and criminal background check. They have a lease. If they do not follow the rules of their lease, they are asked to leave. It's that simple.
Any questions?
I got a question. What has your experience been over the long term with NIMBYism as you, in the early phases of project development?
Yeah. It's formidable. It is. The average person doesn't know very much about attainable housing. There's all types of questions. Everybody knows what a project looks like that looks terrible. And they know about the crime that has been in those. So it's very difficult to kind of sit there and go through a PowerPoint presentation and say, oh, it'll look like this. You really have to show the overwhelming need for it. And it's really the community that has to do that. It can't be me showing up in a button-down shirt saying, your community needs this. It has to be a group from within the community that determines that this is the need. And then you can bring in any number of developers. There's a lot of good affordable housing developers. And then they come in and execute on the vision that the community has. That's when this works. I've been the guy up there saying like, oh my gosh, there's like 10x waiting lists and like all this stuff, and it doesn't ring true until someone from the community really bands together and decides that this is something that is important. And that's the only way. And then it's education, education, education. It's touring the developments. I've come back from tours and people have been like, I had no idea. They had no idea it could be that nice. So that's what you try to work out. But yes, it's scary. People are concerned about that it's going to decrease the value of their home. There are studies that show that it increases the value of the home. If you are doing a redevelopment of a blighted area or something that is, a problem, then you're taking that problem away. So it can have a lot of benefits. It's a good question, thank you.
We'll take Adam's question, then we'll open it up to the public.
Do you have any thoughts on micro housing units?
I do. I think they're interesting. I do. I have not developed any. It's not something that, it is something in the affordable world. It's not something that there is, much active financing for. I'm aware that there was one in West Philly that the new mayor decided to not pursue, shut that down. So I think the response to that was that a small house is not as dignified as a larger, rental apartment.
Well, I meant like micro units actually too.
Oh, micro units.
Yeah, like in an apartment building.
Yeah, sometimes.
Can you explain to us what that means, because some people don't know what you're talking about?
Well, there was a lot of discussion about what a crisis is emerging in terms of the availability of affordable housing and the fact that many deals just don't pencil even right now to construct. They're just not, they're difficult to do normally, and so it's essentially just extremely small apartments. So it's more like what you always imagine, like sometimes people talk about Japan, right, where it's just everything is squeezed down to less space in order to drive down the cost and make it more affordable.
It's a hotel.
And that's how we want our neighbors to live? That's
No,
how
it's like,
we
it's
want
not a
our
hotel,
neighbors to
you
live.
have like
And you can, in the city, the micro units that are in the city are pretty much a hotel.
Usually 100 to 300.
Hotels don't have
And areas-
kitchens.
That's true. In areas that the land is like extremely expensive, you're talking like Hong Kong, Singapore,
Seattle, I mean,
there's
in
Seattle.
this country, I mean, like, this country is
There's a
packed
good
right
amount
now.
of it. Your, in your low-income housing tax credit, rules and regulations, there are minimums for bedroom sizes. So, in order, that is the number one way I know how to develop this housing, and so we need to keep to those numbers. I'm not saying that, you know, if you build smaller units, you'll be able to rent it for less. That logic makes sense, but we're held to some restrictions.
The minimums are actually pretty large that are required by
Yeah,
the
no, I mean,
state.
it would be much more like the norm, right?
They're actually smaller than the market rate that's been built in Narberth.
Well, we just discussed that already, so.
Which is an interesting.
And then right now, of course, even with single family houses in Narberth, right, that it tends to be larger
Right.
than the existing homes.
Okay, folks in the audience, we'll start over here and go that way.
I-
Questions?
So many questions. So how big of a property would be needed for a 45 unit, like acreage wise?
Yeah, probably like 3/4 of an acre.
Okay, is there any property in Narberth that has that much acreage?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so have you looked at like, I mean, you're not, are you like a bidding on a project or?
Let me make clear.
I'm
He's
a
a guest,
professor.
he's a guest tonight to give us information about how these projects are structured. There's no active projects of this sort. There's no conversation at the planning commission. There's no discussions about zoning. Nothing is being bid on. This is purely informational because we, as planning commissioners, would like to know how this kind of development works. You wanna
And
follow?
just as a reference, if you're familiar with the train station, the parking lot on the south side of the train station is approximately 1 acre of land. That's how big one is.
So that gives you a sense of size, but that's not, Adam's not making that reference because we're talking about that site.
No, it's just, that's how big an acre is.
So there's absolutely no.
I suppose there are some.
Yeah.
Well, because, you know, the property that we're most concerned about in the neighborhood is Sabine Park. That, you know, the borough has talked about developing that and or potentially putting a development on that property. So I want to know, is, you know, Sabine Park on your thought process for this?
There's
Or-
no thought process, there is no this.
That is good.
This is
okay.
an informational
This is the
conversation.
planning commission, there's no thought process.
So that
Glad to
answers
take
question
that was
1
funny.
and 2. So have these projects been done in such a dense housing market? Because Narberth is the densest community in Montgomery County.
Yeah.
I mean, how much more dense could we possibly get?
There's
And,
affordable housing right next to Rittenhouse Square. I mean, it can be very, very dense.
Rittenhouse Square, so in Ardmore?
Rittenhouse Square in
In
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. So where there's like $1 million homes?
I'm just saying that's a very, very dense populated area.
So like where there's $1 million homes, there is potential for having a 45 unit low-income housing?
Absolutely. The townhouses that are going to be in Doylestown are going to be in the 900 range, right next to 60 units of
$900,
$1,000.
wait, say that question again?
The townhouses right next to our building are going to sell in the 900,000 range.
Okay, so I think a really huge question that I have as a resident of the borough is, you're talking about the funding and possible funding and this could happen and that could happen, but in reality, will the borough residents ever have to subsidize this?
Not likely. You guys don't get home funds, right? You don't get home funds from.
I don't
from
know
HUD?
the answer to that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, typically not. I mean, there's not. No.
Does Narberth Borough, based on our, now, I don't know your name,
Jennifer.
Jennifer said that the average home price in Narberth is $900,000. Does that mean that, does Narberth qualify for getting federal, state, county, local money to subsidize something like this? So that it would not generate any tax burden on me as a resident?
That's correct. And also the development would pay, real estate taxes. It would pay building permit fees. It would pay all the same fees that all the other developers pay to Narberth.
Okay. My biggest question is, I don't want to subsidize this. I mean, that's really important for, all the borough to know is we don't want to subsidize something like this.
Yeah, no, the financing sources are county, state, federal. Like there would not be a tax on people from Narberth. And Narberth Borough would not put money into this.
What about land? Would you buy it from a private person? Or would it be a municipal property that is given? Or, I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, it could be any of those things. It could be a long-term ground lease. It could be purchasing it from a private person. It could be partnering with an institution that owns land. It can be any of those things.
Okay, it seems that we are way too small for something like this. It's my opinion, we're just too small.
Well, like you said, there's no this.
That's
We are all trying to learn.
That there's no this.
We're all trying to learn about how this works, and our guest tonight is one of many people in this field who does things in certain ways, and we're just trying to see what we can learn. So there's no plan or strategy. This is really just information finding.
But this is something like your company would do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and not to be too forward, but we would be interested in doing it in this area. This is a very highly sought after area, and there is a need for it in the area. But I don't have anything in mind. I talked to them and they asked me to come in and give a presentation.
So do you work with Jeff? Is that how you know each other?
We don't work.
We're in the same industry.
Okay.
We do not work together.
We met at a conference.
Oh, interesting. All right. Thank you.
We'll move along.
Hi, I have, so in this presentation, I have several points. Some of these, as you said, are from Ohio and other places, but the pages are not marked. So it gives the impression that some of this information comes from Montgomery County because you have the numbers in there for income and those kinds of things, even though, so if we're gonna put this on the website, can we please make sure that the pages are titled correctly? Whoever does that, I don't know who, but someone should. And then also of these projects that you showed in the beginning of this packet, how many of those were donated land?
That one right there was donated by the county. There was a county office building on it, and they contributed that to the project.
Right, but your organization does purchase property, right?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you. That was number one. Are we allowed, am I allowed to continue? Or am I only allowed one question?
You can
I can continue. Thank you so much. Step one in addressing the housing crisis we currently have, it doesn't start with building more apartment buildings or another 45-unit building. Unfortunately, on public land or donated land or purchased land. We don't even have rental property registration, nor do we have inspections in the borough of Narberth, so that would be a big mistake. We've been waiting 8 years for that. Secondly, on that particular subject, we don't need to build more. The reality of the situation is this county and this government needs to speak to, this entity needs to speak to county government and to our good friend Scott France over there at Montgomery County Planning Commission to make sure that we talk about eviction diversion programs, which is really important. So our friends and neighbors are being tossed out because the rents can go up. There's no restriction in raising rents, so that's an issue, and all of you here should be advocating before you engage this gentleman or anyone else.
I just want a point of clarification. There's absolutely
I
no
apologize. I used the word
discussion
engage.
of
I
engaging
apologize.
anyone else
I apologize.
or this gentleman, and we would have a
Thank
far more productive evening if
Thank
we
you.
just wouldn't make references like
I apologize. And then, of course, the next piece is the council and this organization, this entity, has the authority to make a recommendation for the 10% rule, where 10% of any development that's currently underway, or it needs to be approved, I guess, in the next year, whatever, however long the process takes, that 10% of those units could absolutely be set aside for those who need accessible housing. And that is step 1 and 2. It is not to find a space, hope we can donate it, hope we can buy it, hope we can build it, hope we can get it approved, hope we can get the grants. We're a little out of order, and that doesn't feel good. And of course, my last point is, and you did clarify that you don't work together, but just to reiterate, planning commission would have to disclose any conflicts of interest with this organization or any other they brought before them if they had, through their work or private matters, benefited in some way from Penrose or any other organization that comes forward. And I'm sure that you would then submit those in writing to Solicitor Walco and let the public know what your conflicts are, including Mr. Gaudini, should Penrose go forward. He stated on the public record that he had already worked with this organization, so he would then be barred from voting on something you would put forward.
I've never worked with that organization, and I don't do
thank
any
you.
business in the state of Pennsylvania. All of my work is in central Texas, mainly in the city of Boston and in some
I
outlying
apologize to you,
municipalities.
sir. I thought I heard that on the meeting 2 times ago. I apologize. Thank
Apology
you.
accepted.
I will assure you that I personally, and I encourage my commissioners personally, to be very rigorous about conflicts of interest. I myself have withdrawn from votes in the past over my tenure here at the commission because of prior relationships. That said, you did raise a good point that I would like to ask your opinion about. It is raised by our community sometimes. Why don't we just ask people who are building any apartment building in town to make 10% of their units affordable by some metric? I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that idea and whether it is, how would that actually work in practice? Do you have thoughts about that? If a market rate developer asked that question.
Yeah, I think you get a big pushback from the market rate developers, clearly. Particularly anyone that already had a development in process, and then the rules would change.
Well, let's take that out.
Right, you can
Let's
use
assume
that.
a new project.
But in
walks
terms
in.
of like the way a kind of market rate deal works, is that something that a market rate deal can absorb?
This is gonna sound like a cop-out, but I really don't know. I don't do a lot of market rate developments, and I would be speculating, really.
That's a big question our community has. It comes up in all of our meetings.
It is
You may not be
it's
able
a
to
math
answer it,
problem
but I would
between-
acknowledge it's an important question. It comes up a lot.
It's a math problem between value of the land and what you can get in rents and increased construction costs and increased interest rates. And that's the outline of the thing, but I wouldn't be able to give you a real answer.
Are you close enough to this topic?
Yeah, I have done market rate projects where there were potential for bonuses in the zoning code to add 10%. And we've worked on them, reviewed them, and the financing doesn't work on projects that are under a certain scale because you cannot make up the difference in the market rate units based on the achievable rent of the market to offset the affordability or the approachable affordability of a lower rent unit. And so what ends up happening is the zoning codes will stipulate what the minimum income percentage is, whether it's 80% AMI, 60% AMI. Typically in those situations it's 80, and the numbers just don't work. So I have never done a project that actually moved forward with it. We just locked the whole story off the building and left it as full market rate.
Gigi, another topic that's come up in regard to this idea.
Say again?
Another point that's come up in regard to the idea you raised that we've talked about in our meetings before is we've never been able to figure out if there were such a rule like that and say it did pencil out and people could do it, how would the borough track that the units were still being rented to people? And what would happen if, say, a family moved in and they met the requirements, but over time they did better and their income's raised, and so we've just never been able to figure out how that could be managed. It would be a big, and I'm not saying that because I'm debating
Sorry,
it.
you know what's happening all across Montgomery County.
I'm saying,
Give me a break.
I'm saying it would be a challenge that would have to be worked out. That's
Sure, like many other challenges discussed. Thank you.
I mean, wait,
I'm sorry.
I have a reverse question. You just said it's happening across the county. Do you have a specific
It
project?
happens in many other places, and
But do
that's
you
why
have
the
an
rule
example?
exists. It's not like we just made up the rule. The rule is out there.
10%.
The 10%.
The 10% rule is out there, but I have never seen a development that actually did it. Not since the pandemic.
We're watching Philly because in West Philly with that,
Yes.
and so we shall see, because the whether people can make it work, cancel it out, and so on, and whether in extreme, I mean, basically where rents are extremely high or value is extremely high, is there an increment where you can make it work? But there's a lot of research that really suggests affordable. We're talking about like how much it costs for rent. It depends on, is there adequate supply matching demand? So population's been rising faster than supply is available in certain areas. So
we're gonna keep going this way so that everyone has a chance to ask questions. Sorry, we're gonna keep going this way so everyone has a chance. Questions over here? Michael, Jean, Jim?
You have any questions?
Go for it. I have a couple of questions. So one is the mixed income model. Can you explain a little bit more about why that's ideal or necessary, and like how you come up with the actual makeup of the percentages for each?
Yeah, so one, I think it's just a good social situation to have a mixture of incomes in an area, just like any neighborhood would be a mixture. So within a neighborhood, within a building, the way that we figure that out is typically we would try to maximize the low-income housing tax credit. So that the state has a cap, so we would look at how many units, could get us up to that cap, and is that a responsible level within the building? Then, based on the municipality, based on our partners, we would come up with an income bands tiering within that. So the developments that we're doing down in Wilmington, for instance, they are 33% market rate. So there's no income restriction on a third of the units. And then there's a band of units that, and when I say market rate, we're in a rougher area of Wilmington. So we are really underwriting them at like a 60% AMI rent. So there's technically no cap, but we are putting it in as a workforce or attainable level. Then there's another tranche that is their low-income housing tax credit units, but there's no subsidy associated with them. Then there's another tranche that is low-income housing tax credits and has subsidy. So, I mean, a third is the goal down there after it's all said and done.
And does that percentage shift for a more affluent community like Harvard?
Yes, it could. It becomes a math problem.
And then the other question I had was, I feel like with affordable and attainable housing, there's always a public perception issue. And you talked about like doing tours of the housing. Is that like open to the public? Is that, and can you recommend any other like forums for education? What have you seen that has been really successful?
Yeah, it's looking at other examples and local examples as well that make sense. And that there's buildings that people drive by every day that they don't realize that have a mixture of incomes in them. So it's identifying a couple of those around here and going to see them. Yeah, open house, if they're owned by us, we can help show. If it's owned by somebody else, we give them a call and see if they'd be to it. So if the borough was interested in focusing on that sort of thing, then we could open up our developments to show you, and we could also call some of the other developers who have developments around here, and then we can see them. And then it's bringing in other professionals. I mean, there's people at the Planning Commission that spend a lot of time on affordable housing. There's the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania is a big advocacy group that goes to Harrisburg and lobbies for these kinds of funds. You could bring them in, and they could tell you. And they're they're a neutral third party that is trying to make it happen in the state. So there's a number of other education groups I was just asked to give a 101 course.
Other questions?
You mentioned there may be local groups that may have an interest in having attainable housing nearby. Because maybe they've lived here for a long time, or they're seniors aging up, or they're recent graduates who've lived here as kids. And, are you saying that those would be the eventual renters? Local people would tend to be the eventual renters in a building like that? Or like when you make your evaluation based on income, you also look at, are these local people who are applying, or are they coming in from?
So we get in a tricky situation
Yeah.
here with fair housing, right? So you need to treat everyone the same. What MUNG responds to that is that if you are working with local nonprofits or community groups that are very interested, you clearly keep them engaged in the process, and they know when the leasing will start for the buildings. You advertise that out, but you are working with local stakeholders and talking to them, and just as you would in any development, just letting them know what's going on, and so they know when it comes around.
So you might also be getting applicants from other cities who want to relocate here perhaps, or something.
Correct.
And then how would they, if they were moving from a city that didn't have quite a high base income level as we have here, how would they qualify for, how would their income qualify?
There's income. It would, the technical answer to that is it would be based on the incomes here.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be based on the income where they came from. It would be based on the AMI levels that the county has. But everyone that came into development would be income qualified. They'd also have to pass a criminal and credit background check.
Sure. So this could potentially become a very attractive AMI development at a high threshold to people perhaps relocating from Oklahoma City or something like that, or that had lower. Is that a thing? Is that a concern?
Well, they'd have to get employment here.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
That's an interesting point.
You're talking about the AMI being lower some other place.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be lower in Philadelphia.
Sure.
I would expect.
Sure.
I don't know.
It's significant.
Yeah, so if you're looking to move here from Philadelphia, your income. Anyway, so.
Yeah.
Maybe Jim, are you sort of thinking that there's sort of a challenge or that the political will to create, I think Ryan's been very clear that these things only happen if a community embraces them, right? So the embracement happens at a community level. We're a small community, so all of us here, we'd have to be part of that, right? But the housing markets are regional. They're not Narberth housing markets. The law doesn't allow you to say, sorry, we're going to rent to Narberth people if you're getting these kind of public benefits. And so folks who apply, they may be from Lower Merion, they may be from across the river, they may be from elsewhere. I think that's what you're mulling over. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know that's an answer. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I'm trying to
picture.
picture the constituency who will benefit from it. Just curious.
I guess in this
Probably a
region,
larger constituency than those who just live here. But some of those people moving from elsewhere might be relatives who couldn't otherwise come back.
the income level being higher, like the AMI is higher, so the 60% of the 114 is still a high income level. So you end up attracting people who want to maybe move out of a location and into a better home and who can afford it, because the AMI is like the threshold is automatically higher because of being in a more affluent location than Philadelphia or Chester or.
You're also going to have varying levels of bands of income that the building is targeting, right? Because the state tax credit makes you have a certain percentage at a low income, but then you have different bands, that's going up. So it's not just all like the lower tier.
It's an interesting challenge, Ryan, because essentially this is a regional or a national problem that's trying to be solved at the county or state level, but the locality also has a big role in the decision making, right? And so these three folks here are elected officials, and so they have to be cogitating on, where's the community will to solve a regional problem. I'm just observing. That's
Yeah. Well, one thing to be is we could go to an affordable housing development in Ardmore or around, like, there's several around, and, we can ask people where they're from.
Is there anyone online who has a question? There's nobody else but Tim. Online. Is that who MSTOP is? Is that?
Oh, that's not you?
Okay, I don't see any questions. So there may be more questions, but what I'd like to do is we thank you very much for being here and for sharing your thoughts and doing the Highwire Act about questions you aren't really as knowledgeable about. We're really grateful. We're just feeling our way to just understand this because the topic comes up at many of our meetings. And so I expect as long as there are people in our community who are concerned about this, we'll be continuing to seek knowledge about it. With that, we'll offer thanks, and I'll talk to you afterwards about the presentation.
Okay.
And
I forgot what the page numbering. I could modify this so if you guys need to see it.
Okay. We'll close this item. Is there any other business that anyone would like to bring up? Is there public comment on any other matter tonight that is related to the business of the Planning Commission?
Not a different matter, because that was the question, I think I had some additional information that might be helpful to some other questions that have been asked earlier. Granted, the context to what I'm about to say is, from my base of knowledge, which is in a different part of the country, so take it for what it is. But in terms of the question about the feasibility of inclusionary set-asides in market projects, I did a deep dive on that exact question for multiple different programs that existed over the course of over a decade. And again, those were non-subsidized market rate programs. My high-level takeaways from that were that many of those programs didn't work on day one, at least in the markets that they were in. They started to work when housing prices were going bonkers, mainly because the market rents were cross-subsidizing the affordable units. But even at that level, and so I would say they worked in the context when that municipality had already effectively created a housing crisis on itself by not meeting the number of folks who were moving into that area. It was able to work in those instances because it was paired with substantial density bonuses that allowed additional units to help the cross-subsidization. And it was prior to construction pricing going haywire, and interest rates were effectively zero at the time. And even with all of that, the peak kind of participation rates in those programs were very low. It was about a third of projects in those programs were actually ending up using those programs rather than developing something else under the base entitlements or just not. Actually, that was the participation rate, so anything that so it was. So I guess my takeaways were that if you don't have it's hard to make those sorts of things work in market-driven projects. If you get kind of like a Cinderella type of scenario and you have some sort of calibration going on, it may work in certain scenarios, but they are difficult to make work for market projects for all of the reasons that were described as to why this works in terms of a subsidized project. And the only other thing I wanted to mention was, right, these are federal tax credits. So we all pay our federal taxes, and we don't normally see that type of federal revenue come back into our community. So even though there is federal subsidization and no local subsidization in many projects, we don't often see that revenue come back into our community. And this type of a strategy brings some of your tax dollars back home to you.
Thank you. All right, make a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
A second. All in favor of adjournment? See you in July. Thank you. Thank you again very much.